This is not a new position for the Vatican. Pope Francis himself has said this before on several occasions. He has a real problem with what he calls gender ideology. And so this document now puts that on paper.
Just days after the Vatican published the Pope-approved Infinite Dignity, a 20-page document that, amongst other things, rejects gender theory, or the idea that a person's gender can be changed.
I think it's stupid, but I'm not surprised. I think that gender is a construct.
Comes the long-awaited findings of a years-long study into the UK's National Health Service treatment of children and young people questioning their gender identity.
Puberty blockers were an experimental treatment for which there was no evidence.
And given the Cass review shifts the trans debate back to medicine and science, one hopes its findings will reverberate back here in the US.
Any child in almost any school, at least in the state of California, can approach a teacher in a so-called safe space, tell them they identify as the opposite gender without a diagnosis from a trained mental health professional, and these teachers have the right to hide this information from the parents, hide the student file, alter the gender on the file, affirm the new identity, use their new preferred pronouns, and begin the process of helping them transition, all under the guise of love, inclusion, and mental health.
Gender medicine is an area of remarkably weak evidence, reads the nearly 400-page independent review, which prominent paediatrician Hilary Cass started working on in 2020. And treatment guidelines developed by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health have become highly influential, but lack developmental rigour, it says.
Initially, NHS England asked me to do a very focused piece of work last year to just look at the published evidence on the hormones that are used for children and young people with gender dysphoria. But it rapidly became apparent that there were much broader problems in the whole care of children from when they first question their gender right through to those who need medical treatment.
The Cass review finds no evidence that puberty-blocking hormones offer young people time to think about their gender identity, and finds that such interventions may in actual fact distort a young person's personal sense of their own gender.
I've just become increasingly worried about the numbers of young people in distress on a waiting list, not getting the appropriate services.
The inquiry was prompted in part by scandals at the Tavistock Clinic, which had been England's main treatment centre for such conditions. But the NHS shut down that clinic following publication of Dr. Cass's interim report, which was published in 2022. Former governor of the Tavistock Clinic and whistleblower as to what was going on there, Dr. David Bell, spoke to the UK's Times Radio about the report's findings.
The implication of her report is that generations of children and young people have been seriously damaged by receiving, one, the wrong treatment, which has damaged them, and two, the multiple problems that they had, such as autism, depression, histories of trauma, abuse, profound family problems, and so on. All those problems weren't addressed because they were seen through the prism of gender, with the rather crazy idea that once we put you on a medical pathway, all those problems will go away.
One youngster who was referred to the Tavistock Clinic when she was 14 years old was Kira Bell. She believed she'd been born in the wrong body and was given hormone treatment for gender reassignment.
So I saw them in January, and by October I had been put on puberty blockers or hormone blockers. It puts you on a path that changes your life forever.
Since the Tavistock Clinic's closure, the UK is directing gender dysphoric young people to centres offering a more holistic approach to mental health concerns. But most attention in the Cass review is focused on restricting puberty-blocking hormones, which the NHS will now only offer in the context of true medical studies.
We have to recognise that we need to move with extreme caution in these areas because we just simply don't know the long-term impacts of what this all means, and children's well-being is uppermost in our mind, and that's why we've acted on the interim findings previously, whether that's the NHS banning the routine use of puberty blockers or indeed the guidance that we gave to schools about how to treat these issues in those environments.
Another important finding of the report, and one that won't come as a surprise to many parents, difference is that it's hard to separate the startling increase in trans-identifying children in recent years with the rise of social media, online pornography, and other factors that can weigh on a young person's mental health.
They need to stop asking little children what they sexually identify as.
Europe's emerging détente in the gender wars is based on compassion for distressed children and families and genuine scientific rigor in how best to help them.
Anybody could come to the principal and say, you know what, I'm transgender, and walk in the girls' bathroom.
Maybe one day soon the US will reach a similar armistice.
Sir, Speaker Johnson said you betrayed the tenet of Easter by proclaiming Easter Sunday as Transgender Day. He called that outrageous and abhorrent. What do you say to Speaker Johnson?
He's thoroughly uninformed.
Uninformed how?
I didn't do that.